The image hit America all at once. Every screen, every timeline, every sports show replaying it again and again. A close-up so raw that CBS would later face backlash just for airing it. Shedeur Sanders standing on the Cleveland sideline, his throwing hand soaked in blood, his pinky finger twisted in a way no quarterback's hand ever should be. And in that instant, the NFL split in two. Some called it toughness, others called it reckless, but almost no one saw the deeper storm forming underneath. December 21st, Week 16. Cleveland hosting Buffalo in freezing conditions, the temperature hovering just above the point where pain lingers longer and injuries feel sharper. This wasn't just another late-season game. This was a rookie quarterback fighting for his future in front of a fan base that had been betrayed too many times to trust easily. A city desperate for hope. A franchise drowning in skepticism. And a young player who many believed was never supposed to be there in the first place. Shedeur Sanders didn't arrive in Cleveland with hype handed to him. He fell. Hard. From early draft projections to a fifth-round pick. From national praise to depth chart obscurity. From potential franchise savior to fourth string, watching others get opportunities while he waited quietly. No headlines. No public complaints. Just patience. And when injuries finally opened the door, he stepped into a situation already poisoned by distrust between fans and coaching staff. That's what made this night different. Because for the first time all season, Cleveland didn't just look competitive. They looked alive. Sanders was calm, precise, confident. The ball cut through the cold air like it belonged there. The crowd felt it too. You could hear it. That rare sound Browns fans hadn't made in years belief. And then, without warning, everything went sideways. One moment Sanders was walking back from the goal line. The next, he was clutching his hand and sprinting toward the sideline. No celebration, no theatrics, just urgency. Cameras followed. And what they showed would dominate the conversation long after the final whistle. Blood, a mangled finger. An injury so disturbing that some viewers looked away while others replayed it frame by frame. Social media exploded. Rumors spiraled. The broadcast booth struggled to explain what everyone was seeing. And before anyone could fully process it, Sanders disappeared into the tunnel. That should have been the end of the story. But instead, it became the beginning of something far more volatile. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay locked in on all the latest NFL drama, make sure you hit that like button. It helps the video reach more people who love this content just like you. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another update, reaction, or storyline as it unfolds in real time. I also want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about Shedeur Sanders' performance and the Browns' collapse? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about it. And don't forget to share this video with friends who follow the NFL. Your support truly keeps the channel moving forward. Because what happened next exposed fractures that had been building all season, between fans and coaches, between perception and reality, between toughness and survival. A backup quarterback stepped onto the field and was immediately showered with boos. Not because of who he was, but because of what fans believed had just happened. A belief rooted in months of suspicion, frustration, and conspiracy. And then, just minutes later, Shedeur Sanders reappeared. Bandaged, bleeding controlled, pain obvious, and determined in a way that silenced an entire stadium. But the chaos didn't stop there. An opposing player would pour fuel on the fire with a single gesture. The internet would erupt again. And suddenly, this wasn't just about one injury. It was about respect, identity, and whether Cleveland was once again watching a young quarterback be tested in ways that rarely end well. Because by the end of the night, one question lingered over everything. Did the NFL just witness the birth of a legend, or the moment another promising career began to unravel? From the opening snap, something felt off, and in the best possible way for Cleveland. There was no hesitation, no nervous checking down, no sense that the moment was too big. Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the field like he'd been waiting for this exact night. The cold didn't matter, the pressure didn't matter, and the opponent across from him definitely didn't matter. His first drive was clean, controlled, and surgical. Pass after pass cut through the frozen air, landing exactly where it needed to. 5 completions. 5 attempts. Nearly 60 yards marched downfield without panic or wasted movement. And then came the touchdown. A perfectly placed strike to rookie tight end Harold Fannin Jr. That sent Huntington Bank Field into a roar Cleveland fans had almost forgotten how to make. The scoreboard flipped to 7-0 Browns, and for the first time all season, it didn't feel fluky. It didn't feel accidental. It felt earned. The offense wasn't surviving, it was functioning. The huddle looked calm. The sideline looked engaged. Even the Bills looked momentarily stunned. This wasn't supposed to happen. Cleveland entered the season buried under low expectations and internal chaos. Quarterback rotations, injuries, questions about leadership, questions about direction, and sitting beneath all of it was a fan base conditioned to wait for the collapse. But as Sanders commanded the offense, something dangerous began to grow in the stadium: hope. It wasn't just the completions, it was the body language. Sanders didn't rush, he didn't over-celebrate. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the playbook, trusted his reads, and believed he belonged on that field. His footwork stayed tight. His eyes stayed downfield. Every throw looked intentional, not desperate. For Cleveland fans, that alone was unsettling. Because they'd seen talented quarterbacks before. They'd seen flashes. But what they hadn't seen in decades was composure. A quarterback who didn't look rattled by a bad snap, a collapsing pocket, or the weight of history hanging over every drive. Sanders wasn't trying to save the franchise in one play. He was simply doing his job and doing it well. The defense fed off it. The crowd fed off it. Even the coaching staff looked momentarily at ease. This didn't feel like a placeholder quarterback filling time until the next draft. It felt like someone auditioning for something permanent. Of course, Cleveland fans knew better than to fully trust the moment. They'd been burned too many times. Every promising start in this city comes with an unspoken question lurking beneath the cheers. When does it go wrong? And that question hovered in the cold air as the Browns took the field again. Because football has a cruel sense of timing. Just when belief starts to form, it looks for the fastest way to shatter it. And as smooth as the first drive looked, it was only the opening chapter. The problem wasn't that Sanders looked too good. The problem was that he made Cleveland believe, and belief in this city never comes without a price. Momentum in the NFL is fragile. One second it feels solid, the next it slips through your fingers before you even realize it's gone. And for Cleveland, that shift came quietly, not with a hit, not with a sack, but with a ball that never should have floated. The Browns took the field again, riding the energy of that opening drive. The crowd was still buzzing, still leaning forward, still ready to believe this might finally be different. Sanders stayed poised, moving the offense downfield with the same calm precision. Nothing looked forced. Nothing felt panicked. It was steady, controlled football, the kind Cleveland fans had been begging to see. Then came the throw. It was supposed to be simple. A short pass to running back Quinshon Judkins, the kind of play designed to keep the offense on schedule and the chains moving. Sanders released it cleanly. The timing was right. The placement was safe. But football doesn't always reward good decisions. Judkins never secured the ball. Instead of settling into his hands, it bounced awkwardly off his chest and popped upward, spinning into the cold December air like it was waiting for something bad to happen. For a split second, the entire stadium froze. And then Buffalo safety Jordan Poyer stepped in and ended the moment. Interception. The sound inside Huntington Bank Field shifted instantly. The roar turned into a collective groan. Hands went to heads. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. What seconds earlier felt like control now felt like vulnerability. One mistake had cracked the door open, and the Bills didn't hesitate to shove their way through. Buffalo capitalized. They didn't rush. They didn't panic. They took advantage of the short field and methodically worked their way into scoring position. When they crossed the goal line, the scoreboard evened out. Just like that, Cleveland's early edge disappeared. The game was tied, and with it came the familiar tension Browns fans knew too well. But here's the thing, the interception wasn't Sanders' fault. Anyone watching closely could see that. The throw hit where it was supposed to. The decision was sound. Yet that didn't matter. In Cleveland, blame doesn't wait for logic, it waits for opportunity. Whispers started almost immediately. Was this the moment the coaching staff would lose patience? Was this the excuse some believed they'd been waiting for? One mistake, one turnover, and suddenly the leash felt shorter. Sanders walked back to the sideline composed, but the pressure had changed. What began as a promising audition now carried an edge of danger. Still, Sanders didn't unravel. When he returned to the field, there was no visible frustration, no rushing throws, no reckless decisions. He didn't try to win the game back in one snap. He did exactly what young quarterbacks are told to do, he reset. And for a brief moment, it looked like Cleveland might settle back into rhythm. But momentum had already shifted beneath the surface. Buffalo played faster. The defense tightened. Every yard felt harder to earn. And with each snap, the game crept closer to the moment no one could have predicted, the moment that would stop the game cold and overshadow everything that came before it. Because as frustrating as that interception felt, it wasn't the turning point that would define this night. That moment was still coming. Cleveland had steadied itself enough to push the ball deep into Buffalo territory again. The drive wasn't flashy, but it was controlled. The kind that suggested Sanders was shaking off the turnover and regaining command. The Browns moved inside the Bills' 5-yard line, goal to go, the crowd rising with every snap. This was the chance to reclaim the lead, the chance to erase the interception from memory. And then time seemed to fracture. Sanders dropped back and released a pass toward the right side of the end zone. It fell incomplete. A normal play. The kind that usually vanishes into the background of a broadcast. But before the cameras could cut away, Sanders' body language told a different story. He didn't jog back to the huddle. He didn't look to the sideline for the next call. He grabbed his throwing hand. Not in frustration, not in pain you can shake off. This was instinctive, urgent. He turned and sprinted toward the sideline, eyes locked downward, cradling his right hand like something had gone seriously wrong. The stadium noise dipped into confusion. Players glanced over. Coaches leaned forward. CBS stayed on him. A white towel was pressed against his hand as he reached the bench. Trainers surrounded him, trying to shield the injury from view. But the cameras were already there, zoomed in, unflinching. And when the towel shifted, America saw what it probably shouldn't have. Blood soaked through the fabric. Sanders' pinky finger looked mangled, twisted in a way that made even seasoned fans recoil. The nail appeared barely attached. Some viewers would later say they saw exposed tissue. Others immediately looked away. Social media lit up in real time, filled with reactions ranging from disbelief to outright shock. It wasn't the kind of injury people expect to see in a live broadcast. Within minutes, screenshots and clips were spreading everywhere. Some sports outlets refused to repost the footage without warnings. Others blurred it entirely. One viral post described the finger as destroyed, words that trended for hours as fans tried to process what they'd just witnessed. On the broadcast, sideline reporter Evan Washburn confirmed what viewers feared. It was Sanders' pinky finger. There was significant damage. He was clearly in pain. And just like that, Sanders was gone, disappearing into the tunnel as medical staff rushed him toward the locker room. Huntington Bank Field fell quiet. Not the restless quiet of frustration, the stunned silence of people who had just seen something deeply unsettling. The conversation instantly shifted from scoreboards and play calls to one question: how bad was it? This wasn't a rolled ankle. This wasn't something you tape up and push through without consequence. Quarterbacks need their hands. Every finger matters. And what CBS had shown made it impossible to pretend this was minor. Criticism of the broadcast followed almost immediately. Viewers questioned why the camera stayed locked in, why the close-ups were allowed, why a moment so graphic was aired without warning. It felt invasive, unnecessary. And for Sanders, it meant his worst moment was already immortalized before anyone even knew the outcome. As he vanished down the tunnel, fans were left staring at the field, unsure whether they'd just witnessed a temporary setback or the end of a story that had barely begun. The silence didn't last long. As medical staff rushed Shedeur Sanders away, confusion rolled through Huntington Bank Field like a cold wind. Fans scanned the sideline, the tunnel, the video boards, looking for answers that never came. No replay, no clear explanation, just uncertainty hanging over a season that already felt fragile. Then the offense took the field again. Out of the huddle jogged Dillon Gabriel, and the reaction was immediate. A wave of boos crashed down from every corner of the stadium. Loud, sustained, angry. It wasn't scattered frustration, it was unified disapproval, echoing through the building and bleeding into the broadcast. You could hear it clearly through the television speakers. This wasn't about Gabriel himself. It never was. It was about what Cleveland fans believed they were witnessing. To them, this felt like confirmation of every suspicion they'd been carrying all season. Another quarterback pulled. Another abrupt change. Another decision that looked, from the outside, like sabotage. Fans had spent months questioning the direction of the team, the trustworthiness of the coaching staff, and whether young quarterbacks were ever truly given a fair chance in Cleveland. And now, with Sanders gone and no immediate explanation, the worst assumptions filled the void. They believed he'd been benched. Not injured, not protected, benched. In that moment, the boos weren't aimed at Dillon Gabriel. They were aimed at Kevin Stefanski. They were aimed at the front office. They were aimed at years of frustration that had trained this fan base to expect the worst. Cleveland has lived through too many quarterback controversies to give anyone the benefit of the doubt. What the fans didn't know was the truth. This wasn't a coaching decision. This wasn't a punishment. This wasn't some quiet attempt to reset the depth chart. Sanders' injury was real, severe, and impossible to ignore. Medical staff weren't debating whether he should return, they were evaluating whether he even could. But that explanation never reached the crowd in time. Gabriel took the snap under deafening noise. The boos didn't stop. If anything, they intensified. It was a rare moment where a stadium turned on its own team mid-drive, fueled by fear and distrust rather than logic. The play call never stood a chance. On 3rd and goal, Gabriel was swallowed by the Bills' defense almost instantly. The drive stalled. Cleveland settled for a field goal. Buffalo took the lead, and the boos lingered even as the scoreboard changed. Only later did clarity begin to seep in. Reporters confirmed the injury. Social media clips resurfaced. Fans who had been chanting in anger now watched the replay in horror. Slowly, the narrative shifted from outrage at the coaching staff to concern for the quarterback they had just embraced. But the damage was already done. Because those boos revealed something deeper than one misunderstanding. They exposed how broken the trust had become between Cleveland and the people running the team. How quickly fans were willing to believe the worst. How fragile any goodwill truly was. And just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get more volatile, Shedeur Sanders was about to walk back onto the field. Just when the night seemed to be slipping completely out of Cleveland's control, the tunnel stirred. At first, people weren't sure what they were seeing. A figure emerged slowly from the shadows beneath the stadium, helmet tucked under his arm. Then the camera zoomed in. White bandages wrapped tightly around his right hand. Thick, bulky, impossible to miss. Shedeur Sanders was back. The reaction inside Huntington Bank Field was instant and overwhelming. The boos from minutes earlier vanished, replaced by a roar that felt almost apologetic. Fans jumped to their feet. Some raised their hands in disbelief. Others simply stood there, stunned that a quarterback who had just left with an injury that looked borderline unplayable was even considering returning. Sanders didn't play it up. He didn't pump his fists. He didn't acknowledge the crowd. He walked straight to the sideline, slid on his helmet, and began throwing. Short passes at first, controlled, deliberate. Each throw was a test of grip, of pain tolerance, of whether his hand would respond the way it needed to. Trainers hovered nearby, watching closely. Coaches leaned in. Teammates paused mid-conversation to see if this was actually real. It was. The CBS broadcast caught the moment he took his first warm-up throws. The bandage was impossible to ignore, but so was the look on his face. Calm, focused, almost defiant, as if the injury had flipped a switch instead of shutting him down. Within minutes, word spread across social media. Clips of Sanders throwing with a heavily wrapped hand exploded online. Bleacher Report posted the footage with a simple caption noting his return, and it quickly racked up millions of views. Fans who had been arguing about the injury just moments earlier were now united in shock. This wasn't expected. Quarterbacks don't usually come back from hand injuries that look like that. Not in the same game, not without weeks of recovery, and certainly not in freezing weather. Yet there Sanders was, preparing to re-enter a game that had already spiraled into chaos. When he finally jogged back onto the field, the stadium erupted again. This time, the noise wasn't confusion or anger, it was respect. Even fans who had doubted him just minutes earlier now understood what they were witnessing. This wasn't recklessness, it was resolve. Still, the football gods weren't done testing Cleveland. Almost immediately after Sanders' return, running back Quinshon Judkins went down with a leg injury that looked serious. He was helped off the field and later ruled out. In the span of one quarter, Cleveland had nearly lost its quarterback and then lost its starting running back entirely. The adversity piled up fast. And yet, Sanders stayed in. With a bandaged throwing hand, missing a key offensive weapon, and playing through pain most players would never admit to, he kept going. He didn't ask out. He didn't shrink. He stood in the pocket and kept delivering. In that moment, the story changed. This was no longer about a rookie getting his chance. It was about what kind of player he was when things went wrong. And as the game moved forward, one thing became impossible to ignore. Shedeur Sanders wasn't just back on the field. He was earning something far more powerful than approval. He was earning belief. If the night hadn't already been volatile enough, one moment poured gasoline on everything Cleveland was feeling. Late in the game, with the Bills pressing their advantage, Buffalo running back James Cook found the end zone. It was a clean score, well executed. The kind of play that should have been routine in a tight December matchup. But what happened after the touchdown is what ignited the firestorm. Cook turned toward the crowd and flashed the watch celebration. The gesture was unmistakable. The same move Shedeur Sanders had used all season. The same celebration fans had come to associate with his confidence, his swagger, his belief that his time was coming. Cook didn't do it casually. He did it deliberately, flexing his wrist toward a Cleveland crowd that had just watched their quarterback return to the field with a heavily bandaged throwing hand. The timing made it explosive. Sanders had barely come back from an injury so disturbing that the broadcast itself was under scrutiny. His pinky was wrapped up, his grip compromised, his pain obvious. And in that moment, an opposing player chose to mock his signature move directly in front of Browns fans. Social media reacted instantly. Clips of the celebration spread across platforms within seconds. Comment sections erupted. Some fans called it savage, others called it disrespectful. Many felt it crossed an unwritten line, not because of the celebration itself, but because of when it happened. To Cleveland supporters, it felt personal. This wasn't trash talk between equals in a vacuum. This was a veteran player celebrating in the face of a rookie who was visibly hurt, but still fighting. A rookie whose story had already become emotional for a fan base, starving for something real to believe in. But not everyone agreed. Defenders of Cook pointed out that celebrations are part of the NFL, that players aren't responsible for managing opponents' emotions, that Sanders himself had built his brand around confidence and flair. And to them, Cook was simply playing the same game, responding with his own statement in a high-stakes matchup. The debate raged in real time. Was it ruthless competitiveness, or was it unnecessary disrespect? What made the moment linger wasn't the celebration alone, it was what it represented. A line had been drawn. The game had shifted from competition to confrontation. Cleveland fans weren't just invested in the score anymore. They were emotionally locked in behind their quarterback. And ironically, Cook's gesture did the opposite of what it likely intended. Instead of deflating the stadium, it unified it. Fans who had been divided earlier, frustrated with coaching, confused about the injury, skeptical about the future, now shared a single focus: protecting their guy, supporting the quarterback who refused to leave the field when everything told him he should. From that point on, every Sanders completion was louder. Every hit he absorbed drew gasps. Every moment he stayed upright felt like a statement. The celebration may have been meant as mockery. But in Cleveland, it became fuel. Because nothing rallies a fan base faster than feeling like their quarterback has been disrespected, especially one who had already proven, in the most painful way possible, that he wasn't backing down. By the time the dust settled, it was clear this night had become bigger than a single game, bigger than the score, bigger than the standings. What unfolded under the lights in Cleveland crystallized everything Shedeur Sanders has been fighting against, and everything he's been trying to prove. This wasn't supposed to be his story. Just months earlier, Sanders entered the NFL surrounded by questions instead of certainty. Once discussed as a possible early pick, he watched round after round pass by before finally hearing his name called in the fifth. Pick 144, a number that followed him everywhere. Analysts dissected it. Fans debated it. Critics used it as shorthand for doubt. If he was really that good, they asked, why did so many teams pass? When he arrived in Cleveland, the situation didn't get easier. He started the season buried on the depth chart, fourth string, invisible on game days. Players ahead of him rotated in and out. Opportunities came and went. And through it all, Sanders stayed quiet. No public frustration, no cryptic messages. He waited. When injuries finally forced Cleveland to look his way, the expectations were minimal. Manage the game. Don't make mistakes. Don't embarrass the team. But Sanders did more than that. He showed poise, accuracy, control. And then on this night, he showed something that can't be taught. He showed resolve. Before the injury, Sanders was having the most efficient stretch of football in his young NFL career. He completed nearly everything he threw. He moved the offense. He looked comfortable in moments that overwhelm most rookies. And when the injury happened, an injury that looked severe enough to end the night, he didn't disappear into the locker room and stay there. He came back. That decision alone reshaped how he's viewed. Quarterbacks are judged not just by talent, but by how they respond when everything goes wrong. Sanders didn't panic. He didn't retreat. He assessed the situation, trusted the medical staff, and chose to compete. That choice carried weight. Fans who had been unsure suddenly believed. Teammates saw it too. Playing through visible pain sent a message without words that he wasn't asking for special treatment, and he wasn't waiting for conditions to be perfect. He was willing to fight for his spot, even when the cost was obvious. And then came the mockery. The celebration from the opposing sideline didn't break him. If anything, it highlighted the contrast. One player celebrating, one player enduring, one flexing, one fighting. The difference was impossible to miss. This moment didn't define Sanders because of stats or highlights. It defined him because it revealed his response to adversity, the kind that strips away excuses and leaves only choice. For Cleveland, this mattered more than any win. The city has seen talent before. What it hasn't seen enough of is resilience paired with composure. Sanders didn't demand belief. He earned it through patience, pain, and persistence. Whatever happens next in his career, this night will follow him. Not as a cautionary tale, but as proof of who he is when the game turns against him. As inspiring as the moment felt, it left behind questions no one in Cleveland wanted to ask out loud. Because toughness in the NFL always comes with a cost. Shedeur Sanders finished the night on the field, but the injury didn't disappear when the clock hit 0. Fingers don't simply heal because a player wants them to. And for a quarterback, especially one playing in late season cold, even the smallest limitation can change everything. Grip, spin, touch, timing, All of it starts in the hand. And Sanders' hand had just been through something no rookie should be dealing with. Reports after the game were cautious. There was no immediate timeline, no definitive reassurance, just careful language and uncertainty. Would the pinky heal cleanly? Would swelling limit his ability to throw? Would the risk of complications force the team to shut him down, even if he wanted to keep playing? Those questions matter, because what's coming next is unforgiving. Cincinnati, Baltimore, two defenses that don't hesitate, two teams fully capable of testing an injury if they sense weakness. Fans have already begun speculating about what happens if defenders start targeting the hand, not maliciously, but within the brutal reality of professional football. And that's only part of the concern. The larger fear lives off the field. Cleveland's history with young quarterbacks casts a long shadow. Promising starts that fade. Injuries that become excuses. Short leashes that snap without warning. Among fans, there's a growing unease that this injury could become a convenient reason to press pause on Sanders' momentum. Some within the fan base believe the organization never fully committed to him in the first place, that his rise came out of necessity, not belief. And while there's no confirmation of that, the suspicion alone speaks volumes about how fractured trust has become. What happens if the medical staff recommends caution? What happens if Sanders wants to play, but the team says no? What happens if a setback occurs and the narrative shifts overnight, from resilient fighter to liability? These aren't hypothetical questions for Cleveland fans. They're familiar patterns. And for Sanders, the timing couldn't be more brutal. With only a handful of games left, every snap matters. Every opportunity is a chance to secure a future that has never felt guaranteed. An injury now doesn't just threaten a season, it threatens momentum, perception, and opportunity. That's the darker side of this moment. The same toughness that earned admiration could also place him at risk. Playing through pain wins respect, but it doesn't always win protection. And in a league that moves quickly, yesterday's hero can become today's question mark. No one knows how this ends. Will Sanders return stronger, turning this moment into the foundation of his career? Or will this injury mark the point where everything slowed down just enough for doubt to creep back in? What's certain is this: the story didn't end on that field. It's still unfolding. And for Shedeur Sanders, the next chapter may be the most important one yet. When the night finally came to an end, the scoreboard almost felt irrelevant. What people remembered wasn't the final score or the standings implications. It was the image. Shedeur Sanders walking off the field with his throwing hand wrapped in thick white bandages, pain written across his face, yet still upright. Still competing. Still refusing to disappear quietly. That image did something numbers never could. For Cleveland, it reframed how this rookie is seen, not as a temporary answer, not as a late-round flyer filling space on the depth chart, but as someone capable of carrying weight, emotional weight, franchise weight, in moments when everything feels like it's falling apart. This wasn't about reckless heroics. It wasn't about proving toughness for the sake of highlight clips. It was about choice. Sanders could have stayed in the locker room. No one would have blamed him. The injury was real. The footage was unsettling. The risk was obvious. But he chose to come back not because he had to, but because he believed the moment mattered. And that matters to players, to fans, to locker rooms. In Cleveland, belief is fragile. It doesn't form easily, and it breaks even faster. Yet in one chaotic night, Sanders earned something this city rarely gives freely: trust. Not blind optimism, but earned trust. The kind built when someone shows up at their most vulnerable and doesn't flinch. The mockery from the opposing sideline, intended or not, only sharpened that bond. What was meant as disrespect became motivation. A reminder that this wasn't just another audition, it was a statement. And the response from the fan base was immediate. They rallied. They defended. They chose their guy. That doesn't happen by accident. The injury will heal. The debates will fade. But the footage won't disappear. Neither will the memory of how he handled that moment. Years from now, people won't ask how many yards he threw that night. They'll ask what kind of quarterback came back onto the field when logic said he shouldn't. Because moments like this don't guarantee a future. But they change perception. They turn maybe into watch this guy. They force coaches, teammates, and fans to look again, to reconsider assumptions, to acknowledge that something different might be happening here. For Shedeur Sanders, this night drew a line in his career. Before it, he was a name surrounded by doubt, draft position, and unanswered questions. After it, he became something harder to dismiss. A competitor. Whatever comes next, whether the road smooths out or gets even harder, this was the night he announced who he is. Not with words, not with gestures, but with resolve when it mattered most. And in a league built on moments, that one will follow him everywhere.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.